All right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at, Kelly. It's great to see everybody today. Today we're going to give this a couple of minutes. I'm just going to ramble on here for a minute while people are still coming in. It's just now top of the hour. So it's 9 o'clock Central. Where Kelly is there in the UK. I believe it is 3 o'clock in the
Yep.
afternoon.
hmm
So, all right, we're getting a few people in. So hey, my name's Kevin Metcalf. I'm the Vice President of the Law Enforcement Division for Whooster and Allen Intelligence. I have spent most of my life working in either state, local, federal, military law enforcement on the investigative side. I've also spent about 12 years as a prosecutor. Those years as a prosecutor were focused on felony cases, and they were focused on where technology meets criminal behavior. So I've had a heavy emphasis on technology and criminal investigations. What I have found, though, is that, well, for one thing, technology evolves, expands, develops so rapidly that it is almost impossible to keep up with. You cannot be an expert in everything every day, especially here when we're trying to hunt criminals or look at bad guys who are exploiting this technology for their own personal gain. And then we have to keep up with that. Now, I will say that one of the reasons I started working with Kelly, I founded the National Child Protection Task Force many years ago. And one of the things that we were working heavily in, of course, I was a prosecutor at the time working in child exploitation. So, for those of you who don't know, you're working a lot with the face that is taken from a child abuse video. So you're looking at videos or images of children who are being sexually abused and raped. And as you can imagine, the priority is to identify, locate, and rescue those children. Well, in the early stages of facial recognition, when that started really hitting with Clearview and some of these other tools, Clearview was always the big one. When you would run a facial recognition, an image through that, you would get back hundreds of possibilities. And, for us, it was always so important that we not just take what an algorithm feeds us. So if you're on a phone number, an email, a face, a location, whatever it may be that runs through technology, and you get this back because the algorithm looks at its data and it pulls back the best possibilities, you still have to have a human making a judgment call. Now with Kelly, I would say, hey, Kelly, I've got these images. I still remember one case. I got two children and I've got one adult, a predator, and I've got hundreds of images I'm looking at. Can you jump on here and help me? And I still remember her getting on, and that one I believe we traced to the country of Georgia. It's where those children ultimately were identified. But she was able, in about 20 minutes or so, to take hundreds of images down to a workable amount that we then handed back to that investigator, who then positively verified that information and rescued those children. So it's safe to say that Kelly, that I have worked with her on the rescue of dozens and dozens of children over the years. So that's why this is so important to me. Now, as a prosecutor, also, if we have any prosecutors on here or investigators, and I know we do, you know how eyewitness testimony and you know how that goes, especially not only in court, but when you're working with an eyewitness on the street and they're dealing with stress and all these other things. After working with Kelly, and we'll get into the why of this in a minute, it became very obvious to me why eyewitness testimony was all over the place. Usually, most of it is really not good. And when you start trying to bring it into a criminal prosecution, it comes with a lot of problems. So, having laid that foundation, this is why I wanted to bring Kelly out today to speak about who the super recognizers are, who she is, where she's at now, and how she got there. But first, Kelly, I want to take a minute and hand this over to you. Just give an introduction of yourself and just a brief overview, and then we'll get started.
Okay. Well, I'm Kelly. I'm in the UK, as you can probably tell. And about 8 or 9 years ago now, I found out that I'm a super recognizer. The term super recognizer was coined by a Harvard University professor who was studying prosopagnosia. And prosopagnosia is face blindness, when you can't recognize your own face in the mirror or your mother's face. It's quite a horrible condition. And when they were researching that, they then thought, well, surely at the other end of the scale, you would have maybe a super recognizer that never forgets a face. So research carried on, and I've become part of that. I was, I get asked all the time, Kevin, how did I find out? So how I found out was by complete accident. I was reading a crime novel by a British author called Peter James. And in the story, in the book, he used super recognizers. The lead detective used super recognizers to help him identify a suspect. And so I Googled the term, saw that it was a thing, didn't think anything of it, thought everybody did the same as I do. I didn't even consider it, but I saw that there was an online test you could do. And a few months later, I did the test, and the test, we'll talk about that a little bit later, and maybe some of your viewers and listeners can take the test themselves. But I did the test and got full marks, but that's a really rudimentary basic test. So Greenwich University, who run the research on super recognizers, got in touch with me when I got the full marks and said, would you like to do some extensive testing. So I ended up at the laboratory at Greenwich and was tested rigorously and found out I was a super recognizer, and one of the top scoring, if not the top scoring they've ever seen. So that has led to me entirely changing my whole career. So I've always been absolutely fascinated and interested in true crime and the legal system. I'm a photographer by trade, but had that interest. So it set me up for quite an exciting time where I've now trained in surveillance. I'm a close protection officer, so a bodyguard, which ties in with the super recognition brilliantly, and a behavioural detection officer too, so I can go out into crowds and look at behaviours and identify people that are behaving in a way they wouldn't normally be in the environment. So I've trained around my skill, and I use it in loads and loads of different ways, which we can talk about, but that's an overview of what I do. A super recognizer is someone who you can show a face to, or a picture of a face for a few seconds, a couple of seconds, and then I can go into a crowd of 60,000 people and find them. So you don't need to have seen them before. Many years could have gone by between that photo and the person. Now it could be a 30-year-old photo and it won't make any difference. They might have a beard now where they were clean shaven in their photo. We can even recognize them with masks on. So that's what a super recognizer is, and you're born with the ability. Your fusiform gyrus, which is the part of your brain that recognizes faces, for some reason or another, in about 1% of the population, triggers differently, and that causes us to never forget a face.
Excellent. A great overview. And I do want to point out that, so I've been around a long time. I still remember back when we had those paper mugshots of, the wanted people that we would always have in our briefing before we'd go out when I was working patrol or working these other events, kind of like what you referred to, Kelly, where you look through these pictures. I still remember working with a couple of people over the years who would always look through these photos, and we'd be out a couple of weeks later and they say, hey, that's that guy.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. So you remember the guy that's in that lineup. And so I do want to emphasize that this is a genetic component. There's a genetic predisposition towards this, correct?
Yeah, that's right. You're born with it. Yeah.
And that makes sense, considering that there are people on one end of the spectrum who can't recognize a face. It's a medical condition. that there would be people on the other end of the spectrum that really can't forget a face, basically. So that's really a fascinating thing. And it's also Kelly's technology. This is the technology built into her operating system. And some of you have it. So if you took the test, and I know Jordana has put that, yep, she's dropped the link in there. I mean, you can wait, but if you have taken the test and you want to drop your results into the chat, please do so. We'll be monitoring that as we go. So did you know early on, before you ever tested, that you recognize faces differently than everybody else?
Well, I used to, the way it manifested with me would be, I'll give you an example. I was at a parade and I looked over my shoulder. There's a great big crowd of people. I was at the front. There's a crowd of people behind me. And for a really split second, I glimpsed a face of a girl. And in that split second, I knew that that was my friend's sister, who I didn't really know, but my friend from school, I knew very well. And I'd been round her house to play when I was about 7, and her little sister was there when I went to play at her house. This was 36 years later, and I knew that it was my friend's little sister. So, I would think everybody can do that. I didn't think I was doing anything special, but what I would find is I would bound up to somebody who I haven't seen for many years and say, oh my goodness, hello, Samantha, how are you doing? It's so good to see you. And Samantha would look blankly at me and start to sidestep away awkwardly, wondering who the heck I was. And I used to just think I'm a really forgettable person. And for some unknown reason, I put a real emphasis on remembering everybody I've ever met. That's what I thought I did. I didn't realize I was doing anything different. So yes, it came as quite a surprise to me. I had no idea. I think it's like you think you're all seeing the same blue sky, the same tone of blue, but who knows? It's hard to quantify it. But no, I didn't realize I was doing anything different.
So we have there's a recognized procedure for a person to be. So is the term super recognized, or is that something you have to earn, or is being identified as having that genetic component enough?
Well, you kind of have to do the testing to know.
Right.
So that takes us back round to the original test that you're talking about. So that test that we've shared the link for is just 14 sort of little exercises, spotting someone out of a lineup. And if you get 14 out of 14, then you're an excellent recognizer. Let's think of it as a Bell scale. So at the very peak of that Bell chart, you've got super recognizers, you've got prosopagnosics, the other end. But if you're a really good recognizer, you're going to be on this edge of the Bell chart, or the Bell scale, coming down. You might not be a super recognizer, but you're good. If you get 14 out of 14, that suggests you're very good. And I would encourage people then to follow the testing through Greenwich University. They've developed this scoring system that tells you if you're a super recognizer or not. There's a cutoff point for the testing. If you get above that point, then you're a super recognizer. But there's different levels of super recognizer even. So the scores go up and up the more successful you are in the testing. But what I will say about the 14 out of 14 test is if you score 10 out of 14, that is what the average person who's an average recognizer will score. So if you are neither special nor poor at it, then you should score about 10. 11 okay, 12 okay, 13 or 14, have a look at the testing, because it's really got to, you should be able to, if you're a super recognizer, you're going to get 14 out of 14, whatever happens. You've got, really, there's no two ways about it. So I would say you've really got to be looking at the top end. But if you're interested and you think that, there's a chance, do the testing anyway. It's really interesting. It's quite hard, and it will sort you out. If you are a super recognizer, you can get that score, and then you can come to me and tell me.
So there is a process. This is just the initial
Yeah.
test. And if
Yes.
you score around a 13 or 14,
Mm.
you would encourage people to then follow up with more testing.
Yeah, if they're interested in doing
Right.
it, it's not it doesn't take hours and hours of your time, but it's really interesting and it's actually quite fun to do. So I would definitely encourage people to do that if they get that kind of score. Yeah.
And I get a lot of questions, and there are a lot of myths out here, but how about race and gender? Are you able to recognize people across different races and different genders and different whatever it may be?
Yeah, it's a great question and a valid one. And research has suggested that you're better at your own ethnicity. Um, However, there's some of us who it doesn't make any difference and can recognise all genders, all ethnicities. So, and I'm one of those. But the leading professor, Professor Josh Davis from Greenwich University, he thinks that city dwellers are better at recognizing different ethnicities because they're used to seeing different faces. However, I've grown up in the middle of nowhere for my whole life, and I'm still can do it. So I don't know. I see where he's coming from, and he's the expert. So I'm sure that is the case. But there are a few of us who are also able to do it. But yeah, you're better at your own ethnicity.
See, there's a question there.
Okay. Can you have a look, Kevin? I can't see
Yes,
it.
how effective are you if the person intentionally tints their skin or receives some plastic surgery?
Yeah, that's has happened in cases that I've worked on, and it doesn't make any difference. You can still get them because we don't really know how super recognizers are doing this. There's been lots of research. I've had wires on my head, and they're trying to decide how we recognize people. But I know that from my personal experience, I'm seeing an overall shape, and it means that I can get someone just from a jawline or a side of their face. I've done it with just nose and mouth. And so, yeah, it's you can change your nose, you can change your jaw, you can change your brow, but there's the essence of you is always going to still be there. I even got somebody, I think it was when I was working with you, Kevin, or I was working with the NCPTF. They sent me an image of somebody who completely filtered their face with a silly
Oh, yes, I remember that.
version of herself.
Yep.
But I could still tell I still knew it was her because I suppose the positioning of the features are still the same, even, the proportions, let's say, or the position on the face doesn't change whatever you do to them. So yeah, I could still get them.
Yeah, so I remember that. So we would have images where people would either sort of try to blur
Yeah.
or like these Snapchat filters
Yeah,
that
exactly.
really really change your appearance.
Yeah.
Kind of make that would make me look 20 years younger. You can still see through that.
I mean, this isn't faces, but this is why I think I'm seeing a shape.
Right.
If I've seen somebody in 360 degrees, I can get them from the back of their head as well. So I've done that on about 3 occasions. I've been able to tell someone from the back of their head.
Okay.
I've seen all of them. I must have seen the whole thing at some point. So again, it goes back to shapes. And it's not that I'm expecting them to be there. So it's not an association with a place or something. They've been out of context and I've still been able to recognize them. So yeah.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of the background. What about, so what happens? They take the test, they score a 14, they go on to other testing and they do well. Is there a training program, certification? What does that look like?
Yeah, my colleague Mike Neville runs training for super recognisers. It's in the UK, but he does do it online, so he gets people from all around the world on it. It really teaches you the legalities behind it, and he throws in some behavioural detection as well, because that ties in nicely. If you're on a task to find known people, you're still looking for behavioural stuff as well while you're out there. And I've managed to catch people that I'm not looking for, but have been behaving in a way to ping me, you know. And so he does a great online course that you can do, which just teaches you all the surrounding things about super recognizers, and does further testing if needed. So that's something you can do. But to actually, everybody wants to know about how to work in the field. And it's, to be honest with you, it's really difficult, because you have to, like any business, you have to be dedicated to pushing it and going and getting the work. So for myself, I have trained in surveillance, being the number one thing that I love to do. And I now work in surveillance, but it's all about me pushing myself out to all the relevant companies. So I now work, I've got contracts with really big arenas here in the UK. I've worked with some wonderful people, but it's, you know, the work is, there isn't some miraculous international headquarters of super recognizers that can palm off. You know, we haven't got a Quantico for super recognizers, which I really wish I had, and I want to be the head of, just if anyone's listening that could help me with that. But no, so that is a difficult one. But if you think about it, being a super recognizer could lend itself to so many things. It just depends if you want to take it further. So you could train and become a private investigator. What a brilliant way of using the skill. Going out on surveillance. When I've worked in surveillance teams, we've been watching a house, let's say, and we're watching lots of different people coming in and out of this house. There's been times when the team have wanted to follow the wrong person, and I've been able to say, guys, no, that isn't him. Don't follow him. We're looking for somebody else, you know. And another example would be, I was following a female subject, and we lost her. We lost her in the London Underground, and we couldn't get eyes back on. So what we did is, the next morning I waited in a position near to her work, which happened to be one of the busiest intersections in London. So I had thousands and thousands and thousands of people passing me from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. when people start work. But there she was. You call it Where's Waldo, don't you? It's Where's Wally in England or
Right.
the UK. She just came walking down the street in amongst, it's like everybody's blurred and she's in HD, you know, and I just got her, and immediately now the surveillance team has control again and you can resume the task. So you know, there's loads of ways super recognizers can be used operationally, but you need to push yourself out there. It's not a job that's going to fall in your lap, and it's also not a job to suddenly drop everything and make your career. It needs to be a gradual thing that you can, you know, pick up and move along with. So I was a photographer for 20 years and still do some photography work, commercial photography work, but super recognition has completely taken over the majority of my career now. But that's taken a lot of hard work, a lot of networking, and a lot of training.
So I've got another question here, but I just want to throw this in, that I remember a couple of times when I was looking at those results. I was looking at either a predator or a child we were trying to identify, locate, and rescue or arrest, depending. And I still remember this was an adult, and I'm looking at the results and I'm thinking, that is the guy right there. And you didn't identify what I think is an obvious connection. And then you're talking to me about, well, look at the the jawline, look at the eye, look at so you start articulating these things, and I'm looking, it's like, oh, okay. And it suddenly becomes clear. But to me, I was looking at what I thought was a great match, and that plays right into the problems with eyewitness testimony that we know very, very, very well, that comes into play. So here's a question from Brandy. What length of time do you need to see a person? Is it just a glance or a few minutes? When you talked about the story of remembering the sister, so was that due to longer exposure?
Great question, Brandy. No, seconds. You just need a split second. So I hadn't really spent that much time with the sister. It was just a couple of play dates and being at school. But No, if there's I do a job regularly each year that gives me about 110 faces to remember for one event. Known people that we don't want into that event are given to me, and I will just scan through them. I need a couple of seconds for each one, and then they're just embedded. I need context to be able to tell. So if you then gave me that face years later, I should be able to remember what event it was from because I've got context. If I've been served by somebody in a store, I'll remember their face forever, but I won't know why I know them. So I might walk past them in the street another day and I know I've seen them before, but I won't know why or where, sorry. But Brandy, to answer your question, it's just a split second and you have this feeling, it just, oh yeah, I know that. Or if you're out on a job and you've been given a face, this is the problem, is to try and keep cool about it, because if you've been given a person of interest and you see them, you want to start shouting and pointing naturally. So it's a matter of keeping calm, keeping cool, but the hairs do stand up on the back of your neck. It's quite a thing.
So with technology and all of our advancements, and there are cameras everywhere, especially in the UK. Cameras are everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Here in the US, there are more and more and more cameras. I walk in my neighborhood and there are these Ring doorbells or Google doorbells. There are cameras over the garage doors. There are other cameras as you enter or leave neighborhoods that are capturing faces and license plates. That's everywhere. It
Yeah.
seems like it's a growing thing. And I have the opinion that we cannot completely rely on algorithms. We're nowhere close. We need that human element. Now, I believe I've been teaching in the UK. I just got back. I was there a week or two ago. But I see super recognizers being used heavily in the UK. Is that the primary country or the primary place where super recognizers are being used? Or are there other countries using these capabilities?
Yeah. Germany and Australia have got police units. The police in the UK use super recognizers. They have them identified in various forces across the country. But Germany and Australia have dedicated super recognizer units there now. I believe I'm not entirely sure where else, but Europe is quite forward thinking with super recognizers, and Australia have got a big presence. I'm the only one running a civilian super recognizer business, so I have got a team of people that I put on task with me, and we will go and work operations. And I'm the only civilian company that does that. But we do have police officers. But I know that in the US there isn't any sort of formalized location or a unit that you can be in touch with, or a university that runs research. So it's a tricky one for the US. But going back to you talking about cameras and algorithms and facial recognition, and obviously I believe still there are some states that have banned it. Is that right?
There are, yes.
Yeah, and I can kind of see why, having seen some of the fallout of some, some of the things that have happened legally with it. So it's understandable to an extent. But like you say, you need that technology to be partnered up with a human being to verify that at the end of the process. And not only does that person have to be a human being, they have to be a human being with heightened recognition skills. Even if they're not a super recognizer, if they're on that higher end of the bell scale of recognition, then they should be the kind of people who are making decisions. I'll give you an example. It's really low level, non-criminal, but an example of how misidentifying can be so easily done is I was just working on a task last week, And it was at an event where people weren't allowed to bring cameras in that had very long lenses. So members of the public were coming into an event, and if they had a big long camera lens with them, they weren't allowed to have that, and they would have to put it away. And as I was patrolling, I saw somebody with a long lens, and my colleague took a photo of that person and put it on the security group to say, can somebody approach this person and just ask them to put their lens away or their camera? And the supervisor said, that's no, that's Juan, who has got a pass for the week. He's a media guy. He's allowed. He must have his pass, his accreditation in his pocket. Well, I'd already met Juan. I knew he was only there the day before. He wasn't coming for any other days of that week, and he didn't look anything like this guy. Yet the supervisor said, no, let him in. And so completely misidentified. And that's a really low level thing with no fallout apart from it's, contravening the venue's rules. But it just shows how easy it is to make a quick decision and say, yeah, that's them. And that's what you do not need with facial recognition results. So when you were talking about Clearview and all the wonderful, I think they're amazing. I have to say, when I was working with your results, the way that the algorithms work, the way the software works and picks these faces out, you can see exactly what it's trying to do when you compare it with the known person's face. They're amazing, but they just don't always get it right. And there's a lot of similars, but not the one. So it's really important to have somebody that has recognition skills, for heightened ones, to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, and you hit on something I've been pushing on for years over here. So our procedure that I had put in place, especially after meeting you, was that, and we had Clearview, we had several other facial recognition tools, and there are more growing now. But Clearview is the one that gets all the media attention.
Yeah.
For its misuse. So for me, here in the US, I always encouraged agencies that if you use facial recognition, or if you have CCTV, if you have images or video coming in as part of your workflow, test your people to see if you have somebody who is a super recognizer who has this capability, and then invest in their training, and then put them in that gap of the algorithm returns this. Now we have a human that's looking, that has this genetic predisposition and training, who can then look further after that triage, basically the algorithm, then we get this return, then a real person, and then they know what they have to do on their due diligence in order to actually make this usable, right? So there's a flow. And that's where I see super recognizers. So in the UK, agencies, in Australia and Europe, there are agencies who, I guess, test their people, or people volunteer to test, and then they put those people in a position where they're working with that. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, but what you'll find is you'll have a traffic cop who is a traffic cop every day of his life, but when they have something they need him for, they'll call him in to do it. So, it's they'll normally carry on with normal duties, but be tasked. So they might be suddenly sent off to an event where they're expecting protesters or known criminals to come into that event. So yeah, that's how it works. So they'll test them, they'll identify them, they'll train them, and put them to work and make the best of their skills.
Yeah, so that would be, so every agency is looking at how to do things safer, from a liability perspective. And I think this would be a very easy and a major win for a lot of these agencies out here, to identify super recognizers within your own realm and have them on for when you do need to use facial recognition tools, or when you need to use any of the skills like Kelly has been talking about. Now, on the private side, you have worked a lot with law enforcement in the past, I know, and they still probably have you on call. As I know, I reached out to you not too long ago. I said, hey, I got a fugitive and some other stuff. Can you help me see if any of these are him? Now, on the private side, I can imagine that private sector investigators, insurance companies. There
Yeah.
are any number of entities, and without naming any specific groups or anything, can you give some examples of what does a private sector look like?
Yeah, so we're working with private investigators. I do get quite a lot of facial comparison reports. So if an investigator has got images of someone that they believe is the person they're looking for, they found them somewhere, they want that verification, then they'll get me to write an in-depth report using scientific mapping of the face, image comparisons, and I write a lovely lengthy report that can be used in their cases. So facial comparison reports are a really good way of assisting the private sector. We're deployed by venues, so I'm talking about large stadium and stadia arenas when they have large crowd events that could be subject to terrorism or generally unwanted people. I've trained as a close protection officer because I was working a lot with close protection teams. So for example, if you have someone who has a stalker or a fixated fan, something like that, then I can memorize their faces and be on the periphery watching for them, or I can be within the team close up to the principal watching, just being on the lookout for this said person. So there's that element. So there's the private investigations is a really good source of tasks. Large crowd events, surveillance, all sorts, and even excuse me, even kind of nice things. For example, identifying historical photos. I think this is my grandfather in World War II. This is the regiment. Can you have a look and see if you think it's him? Nice things like that too. It's not all doom and gloom. But missing persons as well, as I work with various missing persons investigations and cases. Lots of private sector work. That's the majority. I have worked with law enforcement quite a bit, and I've done a few murder investigations and serious assaults, that sort of thing. Anywhere where there's CCTV that needs, people need to be identified from. Yeah, so very varied. It can be applied to so many different things.
And you have a face detect. So tell us about the company you started.
Yeah, so I started working with Mike Neville. He's an ex-DCI at Scotland Yard, and he started up Super Recogniser
Kelly,
International.
you might want to say what that is, DCI.
Oh, Detective Chief Inspector. Sorry.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville of Scotland Yard. He retired from the Metropolitan Police in London and started up Super Recognisers International. And he does the training side, and then I have come on board and I've taken the operational side of the work. So I have started Face Detect, and I've cobbled together a lovely team of super recognisers that I fully trust and that are absolutely amazing. And I take that team to various large-scale events, some quite prestigious events. We've been assisting in looking after royalty, and we did the basketball when you guys came over. The NBA came to London not long ago, and we just made sure everything was running smoothly there. That was a brilliant night. I do the operational side. I have run a few little training courses. I haven't got anything planned at the moment because the work is too full on. But I do remote stuff. Would be things like facial comparison reports, and then the live stuff. So stuff on foot.
Okay, let me see about this question before I forget it. Did you find it difficult to work with this skill initially? Was there a struggle with people believing that you can do what you do until you proved it to them?
It's not so much people struggling to believe it, it's you struggling to believe it. So until you've done it in anger, until you've actually found that person. You've done all the testing and you've been told you're a super recognizer, but until you actually go out there and you find a person you're looking for. And I remember Mike I was the first group of super recognizers to ever train in behavioural detection with Mike, and going out. What he did is he put some stooges out in a very busy market in London, and he gave us some photographs. Cunningly, he gave us a photograph of someone who wasn't going to be there, so he wanted to see if we would misidentify people, which was good. I thought that was quite clever. But he also gave us a photo of somebody who was about 16, 17 years old in the photograph, with fresh, clean shaven, young face and blonde spiky hair. And we went to the market and we were looking around, and we were there about an hour, and I didn't recognize anyone, and I was getting more and more anxious about it. And then all of a sudden, he didn't look dissimilar to you, Kevin. It was about
Quite a change.
I don't know. He'd got a beard, put it that way. He'd got a beard. Yeah, sorry, your fresh face, Kevin. Yeah.
Right.
He'd got a big beard. His blonde hair was now slicked right down and looked dark. And I think the photo was maybe 30 years old. Wow. But he walked past me and I knew it was him straight away. And the feeling, it comes to you every time you do it. It doesn't get old. And so from that point on, it kind of, if you're going to be able to recognize him, you're going to be able to recognize anyone. This works. This really works. But the thing is, it's the same with everybody in any job, any task you're on. You kind of get the self-doubt, you get imposter syndrome, and then you succeed again, and then you succeed again, and you then get that confidence that you know you can do it. It's just believing in yourself. So that was the journey from that point of view.
So it's not convincing other people, it's convincing yourself.
Yeah.
That, can I really do this? But that situation you just described. So we have, a lot of stuff I've been involved in, surveillance, counter surveillance, but when you get into close protection, dignitary protection, when you get into, these threat assessments, we're in a lot of ways pretty good at identifying potential threats, identifying people. Yeah. Sometimes the people that we're looking at that are threats have pretty good operational security. Maybe we get some old photos, but what you're talking about is a really, really good reason to have an identified and trained super recognizer on your team.
Yeah.
If you're doing anything like this, because that person would have walked right past me, regardless of my best intent. But to have somebody who can just trigger on an old photo, even with those changes, if it's in the right setting, that's vital to have. We got another. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say before take that question. Prime example is I was working at an event that had 60,000 people there. It was a very high, very well publicized event. And there was a threat come in that said that someone was going to attend the event and they were going to cause harm to as many people as possible. So it's a really credible threat. They had a ticket for that show that evening. And I was in charge of looking for POIs, obviously. That was my job on the team. So I disseminated the photo of the face of the team. But I did some more digging into him before I went out to look, and got a few other images. So I worked out where he was due to come in to the event, and luckily the organisers had cancelled his ticket, so there was no way the scanning of the ticket would have worked. But I went and stood at the queue where I thought he was going to come in, and there were literally thousands of people coming through those gates. And I looked up along the queue and I could see a great big mop of hair and a hat coming towards me, but I could see that part of his face, his nose and his mouth and chin, and I knew in an instant that it was him. Now he was this threat was known to the local police. So I radioed in that I'd got eyes on the person of interest, and within seconds, the police had very subtly took him out of the crowd. No one noticed, and he was arrested and taken away. And it was, we could get on with the event without any concerns. So that's an example of where it's actually quite serious, and
Right.
why anywhere that's got that kind of a threat, or any person with a threat against them, should really take it seriously enough to use someone like myself, who will give them a fighting chance of finding that person before they get into the crowd. If they'd have been able to get into that arena, we can't even imagine what would have happened. So it was it's an anecdote that really just drives it home how important it is.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Having worked in a lot of these, especially in the counterterrorism realm, when I was doing that many years ago, this is a skill that, and at that point we didn't even know about it, which kind of ties into the question now from Detective Welch. So outside of natural ability, what are the fundamental principles or best practices used to quickly identify and recognize individuals? He goes on here he says, I have traditionally been taught to memorize isolated physical traits, such as hairlines, nose structures, and ear placements. However, I am curious about how a professional super recognizer approaches this. Do you rely on these specific feature breakdowns, or do you utilize holistic processing, configural relationships, and dynamic cues like gait and demeanor? He said, I would love to know your top strategies for rapid, accurate identification. So
great question.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get exactly what we're being asked here. So yeah, the way I recognize someone. So for example, if a private investigator sends me two photographs and he says, compare these two faces, is that person the same person as that person? I will know in a split second whether it is or not. But I will not, for the sake of a facial comparison report, I will not just rely on that instinct alone. I now will look in huge detail at each part of the face, how it ties up, and why I got that feeling in the first place. What's made me be 100% sure that's the same person or whatever. So, but for a quick ID, I just know in an instant, but that's difficult for somebody who's not a super recognizer. So you might not have the luxury and time to study their hairline, or where their ears are positioned, or that you might not have the luxury of time to study them. But if you're looking at photographs, always, it's a basic thing that I always go to: ears. If you can get two ears in the same angle and compare them, everybody's ears are absolutely unique, and you can completely write somebody off as the wrong ID just because they've got a different earlobe or a different shape ear. So ears are brilliant. They always help out. The drilling if you've got photographs, drill down into each part of the face. I look at the way the eyelids sit. I look at the shape of the eyebrow. How far does it come across to the end of the eye? You look at the shape of the nostrils, the chin, the jawline, the cupid's bow in the middle of the lips. You can drill down into those if you've got images to compare, but on foot, if you're making a quick decision, it's much more difficult, and requires someone with good recognition skills to be able to make that snap decision, unfortunately. So for me, I don't look at any specific feature. I just know, and it's not a helpful thing to say, but that's something we still don't quite understand how we're doing this. Are we just taking in that whole shape? And I think that's what I do. I hope that answered that lovely question, Detective Welch.
Yeah, so it's he's asking outside of natural ability. So I think that would be very, and I have taken the test, and I think I scored a 12 or 11 or 12, something like that. I am definitely not on the high scale. I'm not on the low. I think I'm probably I'm in the average range. But I've got to say, like that example I mentioned earlier, where I'm looking at two faces. This one face that's in this mask that has been returned to me by this facial recognition program, and I'm thinking, well, that's obviously, that's the same guy. And I get Kelly on, she starts running through there and doesn't select that one. I was like, well, what about this one? And then when she starts articulating why, like the ear placement, I think maybe was different, and which obviously you can't fake that or change it uh,
No.
without some sort of AI thing. Which that maybe that's another question, Kelly. But
Mm.
when you look at that is something that I was thinking, man, that was an obvious call to me. I would have gone right after that, and I think that highlights again why it's important to have somebody with this genetic component that
Mm.
can be enhanced and further trained doing these jobs. But here in the US, we still don't make use of the resources we have within our own agencies, or maybe even look at hiring somebody with that skill set for, maybe bigger agencies or groups that have this as a dedicated component of their workflow. There was another one I remember running the face of a person. It's a volunteer that was sitting with me, and we were doing a human trafficking op. He said, "How does this work? This facial recognition?" So I ran him, and he didn't need. So he was looking. He's like, "That's not me right there." Well, ends up it was. The facial recognition picked him up in this group, and he didn't even remember it. And it took a little
Wow.
bit before he said, "Oh yeah, no, that is me. I completely forgot." So even recognizing ourselves in some situations, of course, he may have been on the low end of the scale on
Yeah.
that, but anyway, Detective Welch, I think I have worked with those people like Kelly that back then we didn't even think about the genetic aspect, but I've worked with these people over the years who just remembered a person weeks or months after exposure to that wanted poster or that briefing that had that face. And those people obviously I think are the super recognizers that I've worked with, but I remember people having that skill set, and I'm thinking, how do I do that? How do I develop that? Well, it turns out there's a genetic component that maybe you can train only so far. But if I'm hearing you right, Kelly, there's an instinctive hit that this is it right here based on what I'm seeing. Then you move into the articulation of
Yeah.
why that is. And I know that because I have actually put your descriptions in legal documents that we use in prosecution. So
Yeah.
that's a phenomenal use of super recognizer capabilities within your own agencies. So do we have anybody here in the chat that has taken this test that wants to talk about their results? If you do, drop them in. Keep the questions coming. And I brought up the case of AI. What do you think about AI and the image generation that is coming? I do see where I should have brought some of these up with me. I have put my own image in AI and I say, hey, recreate this, or recreate me with my dogs, or
Mm.
and it pulls something up that looks pretty close, but I get to looking and it's just like that's not me. I mean, you can
Yeah.
obviously see that. What do you think about AI? What's that going to be in the future?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to talk about. I don't really know uh, how it's going to impact. I mean, obviously, anything artificially made is going to be difficult for me. I can't do it. I'm relying on raw material. I can't, if it's
Right.
if it's potentially AI, then I'm blown out of the water. I can't do anything about it. So yeah, I don't know how it's not going to affect my work on the ground, obviously. But yeah, I can't talk enough about I can't talk in any with any knowledge about AI because I only use ChatGPT to work things out.
Right. Yeah, and this may be something that, because I know I had a judge contact me once that
Mm.
somebody had used AI to put him into a video that made that tied him into a case, a homicide case that was before him in the court. That, there's crazy stuff like that we're going to see in the future, but we really don't know where it's going to go yet. We still have issues with child exploitation and other things, but where you come in, we still have that real element and that genetic component that is so important in all of this work. Let's see what other what have we touched on here that is going to be of interest to the people in this chat, to law enforcement here in the U.S. Do you have any suggestions that you've seen in the UK or Australia or Germany? And these countries have been using super recognizers within their workflow for a while, and you gave us an example. What would you say to U.S. law enforcement agencies? And also, I know we've got some private sector investigators like insurance and finance. How could they best put this to use?
Well, from a law enforcement point of view, you need to identify the people in your ranks and identify them, find out, even if I think it's worth investing. If you're getting somebody who can get 14 out of 14 in their test, and you need to witness them do it, I guess, or make sure it's a genuine result, invest in their testing. If they're super recognizer, and then deploy them accordingly. With private work, I would say, obviously you're not going to have masses of people to choose from, but come to somebody like me to help you with an investigation. So I can, it doesn't matter where in the world we are, I can help you with a facial comparison. I can analyze footage or imagery and produce a document for you that can be produced as evidence. I'm really passionate about getting super recognizers deployed in the right places and being utilized. It's not something that necessarily would, for like I've said to you about law enforcement, they'll still do their usual tasks, but they're just brought in for special operations. It's amazing for that individual, who might be doing something totally different, but at that time they are now utilized in the best way possible. And we've seen so many brilliant results and so many things avoided. So people found it's invaluable. So that's what I would really encourage anyone who's got that option to put the test out to all of their staff and say, here's a fun thing to try, and see if you've got anybody out there.
Here's another interesting question: was photographic memory, or was it eidetic memory? Is that what it's called? Versus super recognizer. Any insights into the photographic memory versus super recognizer?
Yeah, so it's completely different. So super recognizers, as I mentioned, have got a special part of their brain. We've all got this fusiform gyrus. We've all got it. It's what recognizes faces, not anything else, just faces. And excuse me. And we don't know why, but ours just works in a different way to everyone else's. So photographic memory is something completely different. I don't know what part of the brain that relates to, because I haven't got it. And a lot of people say, are you good with names? I'm rubbish. I'm awful. I'm rubbish with names. And a lot of other things. I can't remember my own name half the time. But totally different thing.
So the ability to recognize a face doesn't necessarily mean the name that goes along with it. It's just, I know that face.
Yeah.
And you can also remember in a large part the context where that face was tied to.
Yeah, exactly that. I can't really remember many of the POIs that are the persons of interest that I've found over the years, but I certainly can bring their faces up in my mind immediately.
So we're coming up. Actually, we've got a minute left in the scheduled time, Kelly.
Yep.
What have we not discussed that you think is important? And this is going to be put out on our YouTube. Going to admit somebody there. This is going to be out on our YouTube channel. So we've discussed law enforcement and private sector some. What about just the public? What what do you think they need to know, or what what might they be interested in?
Well, go and do the test. See if you are a super recognizer or you're really good at recognition, because, excuse me, because it's a really interesting field. So even if you don't want to do this as a living or to work on it professionally, you can test your skills in everyday life. You can, you know, I would be walking around a shopping mall and I would keep seeing the same person, and I think I'm being stalked by this person. This person is following me wherever I go. This was before I knew what I was doing. Now I realise I'm just simply passing the same person in different stores. We're on the same kind of route around doing our shopping, and there's nothing sinister going on. But it's actually, if you are a super recognizer and you haven't found that out yet, it's actually quite liberating to find it out, because you suddenly realise why you've been paying so much attention to people all these years, why you can remember that person from college and why they don't remember you. So yeah, and you can even run little surveillance jobs yourself. You know what I mean? You can practice out and about in public. It sounds a bit strange, I know, but it's a fun thing to do. So yeah, it's good. It's good to know. And it's a good thing to tell people at a dinner party as well.
Yeah, so it's an interesting skill, and it's one I definitely wanted to make people more aware of, especially in law enforcement, because I see a lot of the lawsuits, a lot of the negative news about
Yeah.
how technology is being used, especially facial recognition, how it's, violation of our privacy, which, I'm just going to throw in that I told my daughters over the last 20 years that anything you put out, anything you text somebody, anything you post online, anything that goes out and leaves your control and goes out into the wilds of the internet, you no longer have an interest or a privacy interest in that. You have released it to the world, basically. And I know that views differ on that, but if we as law enforcement are going to use a technology like facial recognition, we are obligated to use it in the least invasive and most professional way possible. And I don't think you can do that with facial recognition without having a super recognizer in the loop. Just my opinion on that. And that's from working with Kelly for a number of years and seeing the tremendous value of not going down the wrong rabbit hole, chasing the wrong people, which I would have done on several of these, because I knew I identified the right person until Kelly came along and said, no, that's not him. That's a real thing. And that saved me. There's no telling how many hours of work that saved me in digging into somebody's life that I didn't need to dig into. So I think there's a lot to think about with this capability and identifying that capability within your own ranks. So, Kelly, we are at the top of the hour that we've had scheduled. Do you have anything else you want to get into, or?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. I've got so many stories I could be talking all day, which I don't think anybody would want. But yeah, it's been a true pleasure, and I encourage anybody to get in touch if they want to ask me any questions, and if I can help with any cases, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy. We're a very small world now, so I can help remotely if needed. Yeah, it'd be nice to hear how people get on.
So I'm going to drop let's see, in your site is asking me if I'm a human. Can we put in and Abe or Jordana, they're asking about what is your YouTube? Can we put that in? And thank you, Curtis. I appreciate that. Brandy. Well, this is giving me problems. So can you just give people your website?
My website. Yeah, my website is Face Detect, FACEDETECT, facedetect.co.uk. And you can get in touch with me through there, and that gives you a bit more information.
There we go. Now I got it. I'm having some technical difficulties here, so I'm going to drop that in the chat. Any other sites so if you've watched this and you have not, and nobody was brave enough to drop their, other than Jordana, nobody was brave enough to drop their test scores in here, but please, if you have an interest in this, especially if you're at a law enforcement agency here in the US, take this test, encourage your agency to look further into this. Contact Kelly if you need any information on training. Greenwich University, and for those of us here in the US, that's Greenwich University in the UK. But thank you so much, Kelly. It has been wonderful talking to you again about all of this and going over this amazing skill. I'll let you, do you have anything else you want to add? I know I keep asking you that.
No, I just want to say thanks for having me, Kevin. It's been lovely to see your face.
Yes.
Your fresh face.
My fresh face.
No,
All right. Well, thank you,
great.
everybody. And this will wrap up this webinar. We will have this out on the YouTube soon. The YouTube channel. That didn't sound right.